I've been asked to talk about men's health. June's Men's Health Month. I think I'll just cover a couple of topics. I think it's supposed to be about 5 minutes, so I'll try not to go over that. I think the first topic I'll talk about is just general screening recommendations for routine health. I do recommend that guys get in for a yearly checkup. Even starting in your 20s, it's not a bad idea, because one of the screening recommendations is blood pressure should be checked once a year, every year, starting in your 20s. And actually, even when we have pediatrics coming in, we're checking their blood pressure and making sure that they don't have an elevated blood pressure, even at a child check. So blood pressure screening is recommended once every year. And then if your blood pressure is over 135, over 75, they actually recommend screening for diabetes and men who have prehypertensive blood pressures. So those are two screening recommendations. Another screening recommendation that starts later on, they've moved colon cancer screening down to age 45 from age 50 because we're starting to diagnose colon cancer, men and women in their 20s, 30s even, which I think a lot of that has to do with our food supply, the chemicals in our food supply, and a lot of other factors. But so colorectal cancer screening starts at age 45 now to age 75, and then it becomes a doctor-patient conversation. If your life expectancy is going to be over 10 years, it's okay to proceed with colon cancer screening after age 75. Otherwise, patients can decline, and that's fine. But so colorectal cancer screening starting at age 45 now. Prostate cancer screening would be the next one, starts at age 55, and then generally runs. They change it frequently. Seems like every 2 to 3 years they're changing it, but the latest recommendation, they moved it down from age 72 to 69. So men age 55 to 69. I will tend to have a conversation with men after they turn 69 and say, do you want to continue prostate cancer screening? I'll talk about the risks and benefits. A lot of times PSA can be elevated just from enlarged prostate, and that can lead to biopsies and other procedures that maybe aren't really necessary. I have a lot of guys that just continue to screen for prostate cancer. It's probably 50-50. Some of them want to keep doing it. Some of them are like, yeah, I don't want to screen. The reality is by the age of in their 70s, men, I think it's something crazy. 75% of men have prostate cancer. It's just so slow growing that usually men die from some other cause, like heart disease, some other form of cancer, something like that. It's very common for men to have prostate cancer, but a lot of times it goes undiagnosed. And another screening recommendation is triple screening for abdominal aortic aneurysms. This is like any man over 65 who has smoked, I think it's something like 100 cigarettes or more in their life, should get a one-time ultrasound to screen for that. So that's not every guy, but anybody who's ever smoked basically should get that done. And then lung cancer screening for men who have, I believe it's over 20 pack year history, starting at age 50 to age 80, once a year CT scan for lung cancer screening. So they're the basic screenings. Like I said, diabetes for anybody who has risk factors, obesity, family history of diabetes. We would do either fasting blood sugar or a hemoglobin A1C. So that generally once you get to about age 40, you're going to get maybe some yearly lab work in there too. Like for men in their 20s, I generally will do lab every 5 years or so and screen their cholesterol. Cholesterol is another one. They don't actually recommend screening until age 40. Generally, we won't prescribe medication or recommend treatment until, even if your cholesterol is elevated, unless it's like through the roof and some genetic condition, we're just going to say when you're 40, we'll talk about treating it, or unless you get heart disease before then. So cholesterol screening generally starts in the 40s, once a year cholesterol, or every 5 years. It depends on who you look at. So those are the main screenings that I recommend for guys. I think the other big part that gets missed is prevention. I feel like we're a very reactive medical system. Like we screen for disease, we treat disease. We don't talk a lot about preventing disease. I think that's where in a large part, our system is set up backwards. We're set up to treat diagnose and treat, not prevent. It should be flipped 180 degrees, right? Or flipped on its head. The big three things that I think everybody, this is men and women, by the way, our diet, exercise, and sleep are the three pillars of our health. And in America, we do a terrible job of all three for the most part. Obviously, there's people who are living healthy lifestyles, but for food, I just recommend like as much whole food as possible, non-processed food, organic if possible. I tell people to stay on the outside of the grocery store, like where they have the meat, fruits, vegetables. You get into the center aisles, and you got boxed, canned. It's got a lot of additives. I think there's like over 3,000 chemicals in our food supply that are banned in Europe that they won't even allow into their food. Because of how our governmental system set up, food companies don't have to prove safety. They can put something out there and then monitor for problems that come up later. And so I think that hopefully it'll get changed with the current administration. They're looking at changing how the FDA regulates food. FDA, Food and Drug Administration, everybody concentrates on the drug, but it's our food supply too. And I think our food supply is probably the number one cause of illness in the United States right now, because our food supply is extremely inflammatory to our bodies. And that causes probably 90% of all of our chronic illnesses starts with diet. So diet, I'd say, is number one. Just eating whole foods, organic foods if possible. Not always possible, but because they're more expensive. And avoiding any processed foods. And then I'd say the other thing is, like in the 90s, they came out with the food pyramid. You remember? Yeah. I don't know. Some of you guys maybe, I remember I was in high school. Some of you guys might not even been born who are here, like Mason. But they said 6 to 8 servings of grain a day right at the bottom. And then they like, I'm trying to remember. That's the one I remember. 6 to 8 servings of grain. Then it was like, I think like fruits and vegetables next, then meat, then fat, then sugar, sweets. I mean, I think that it's been proven that's not what we should be doing. We're a farming ranching community. So the way I explain it is, what do you feed cows to get them fatter? Grain, right? So why at the bottom of that, they have 6 to 8 servings of grain? That's just crazy. I generally try and just recommend higher protein diet. And so lots of protein, some fresh fruits, some vegetables, like almost I recommend trying to eliminate almost all processed sugar and flour if possible. So like the white starched flour and granular sugar, that should be like just almost cut that out of your diet completely. These are all hard to do, by the way. It's not easy. It's not easy to do these things, but that's what I would recommend. And I'm trying to make those changes slowly myself. It's just hard to do. All of this is very countercultural because our society and culture is set up to make this difficult. It's just the way it is. So diet's important. I would say exercise is the next thing. And it doesn't even have to be like, they've proven, there's been studies that have shown they had people walk 30 minutes a day. And then they compared that to blood sugar levels to people who walked 10 minutes 3 times a day. And then another group where they walked 3 minutes every hour throughout the day. And they found the people that walked 3 minutes every hour throughout the day had lower blood sugars than the people who walked 30 minutes continuously, or the people, like each time you broke it up, like I would say more movement is better, not necessarily like just, you should still get like 30 minutes. I think they recommend 140 minutes of moderate vigorous exercise a week. You should still get that, but you should be moving more frequently. So I recommend just get up and move 3 minutes every hour if you can at your job. More movement is better. And you don't have to go out and run a marathon or anything. Just go out for a walk. If you can walk 2 to 3 times a day, whatever you can do is important. So just more frequent movement. And then I do recommend resistance training 2 to 3 times a week along with cardio, if you can work that in. And then the final one is sleep. So this is another area where in America, we're just horrible about sleeping. 6 to 8 hours a day for adults is generally thought to be what we need. Some people need more sleep. Some people need less. The big one of the most common things I see in my office is insomnia, people having trouble sleeping. I think it's generally because we spend so much time indoors under artificial light. It's actually recommended that you should see the sunrise and sunset at least 3 times a week because that helps sets our biological clock so that we know when it's time to get up and when it's time to go to bed. Most of the time we're indoors in this artificial light and we have a lot of blue light, and that activates and stimulates the brain. So another recommendation is 2 hours before bed, try and eliminate blue light from your environment, whether it's wearing blue light blocking glasses. They actually make red wavelength like light bulbs you can put in your bedroom. Trying to shut off all devices and maybe read a book or something. Try and dim the lights as well as it gets closer to bedtime. If you have dimmers, like dimming the light helps. So a lot of our issues with sleep are not, they're sleep hygiene issues. We just don't do the right things to help our bodies sleep. I also recommend that the bedroom should be like 60s. I think they've proven like 65, 66 degrees is like the optimal sleep temperature, which most people probably aren't doing. I think those are some big things that like really help. So the other thing is like the first thing in the morning, within the first hour of waking up, if you can get outside for 10 minutes in the sunshine, that actually helps you sleep better at night. And then no caffeine after 3, try and exercise earlier in the day as opposed to late in the day. If you exercise within 3 hours of bedtime, generally you have trouble falling asleep. So I think those are the main 3 things. If people did a better job of eating a better diet, exercising, and sleeping well, we'd be a lot less busy in terms of taking care of like chronic illness like diabetes, high blood pressure, heart attack, stroke, and cancer. Those are the main things I would say. Talked about screening recommendations and then just the 3 pillars of health. The patients that I have that eat well, that exercise and sleep well, I don't see them as often. I see them once a year for their checkup. There's a book called Good Energy by Casey Means, MD. And it covers like basically the exercise, sleep, and diet in detail and how it goes down to the cellular, molecular level and how if you're not doing those things, it cascades and turns into all these other problems that we see. So that's a good book. And she actually was nominated as Surgeon General for the United States. I recommend that's a good read, is Good Energy by Casey Means. I think it's just an interesting take on how you can stay healthy without having, and how you can prevent chronic disease. Questions about anything?
Yeah. What's your theory on melatonin or helping age what water is supposed to be non?
Well, melatonin, yeah, that's fine. I recommend that as a starting point. More and more, I'm talking to them about these other things. Do these things first and do them for about 2 to 3 weeks and see if you start to sleep better. If that doesn't work, then I'll talk about melatonin. It is not addictive. There's no long-term studies on melatonin, and I think it's probably generally safe, but it shouldn't. There's no long-term studies. If you take melatonin for 5 to 10 years, this is what it does to your brain, like, or your sleep patterns. We just don't know. But I think melatonin's a good starting point. But I think, again, that's a Band-Aid solution to the problem. The problem is our lifestyle and how we go about things. We don't get enough time outside. We don't get enough time in the sunlight. All of these things that we need to do to sleep well, we're not doing. And it's all the artificial light in our environment. All of that's causing it. So I hate prescribing medication for something when I don't have to. And so once people have tried the sleep hygiene, then I'll do melatonin. I really don't like prescribing anything prescription because there's one or two that are non-habit forming out there. But again, generally we're just band-aiding a Band-Aid solution to a problem that we need to do something different for. But melatonin's, I think, relatively safe and non-addictive. Again, that book, Good Energy, has a whole section on sleep, and it's really interesting stuff that I didn't even think about until I read the book. So,
we're living this way. We're doing our best to live this way. We recognize there was extremely stressful situation. Sometimes work becomes stress.
Yeah, that's where you can't live a stress-free life. It's impossible. There's going to be good stress. There's going to be bad stress. I think the biggest thing about stress is having some kind of outlet for it. So that's where exercise, you have to find an outlet for your stress. So some people exercise, some people have a hobby. Like I feel like, so having support, just like family, friends, like emotional support system, those are the things you can do, because you can't eliminate it. You just have to effectively deal with it.